لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا كريم اللهم يسر لنا اليسرى وجنبنا العسرى واجمع لنا بين خيري الدنيا والأخرى. أما بعد, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us always sincerity and steadfastness in seeking the obligatory knowledge and to the ability to act upon it until we meet Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people might be saying we're going a bit too long. It's been a few majalis, a few classes, but inshallah we'll try to finish it in 4 more classes bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, maximum 5. But that's seeking knowledge, right? As Imam Shafi'i mentioned, a few things that are required when seeking knowledge, such as wealth, a teacher, and you need tul zaman, you need time, right? You can't become a person who's knowledgeable in a few hours, in a few minutes, right? The bigger the knowledge, the more time you need, right? The more time you need grinding, the better the sword, the longer it takes, right? The better quality takes more time. Okay, so we ask Allah for steadfastness and patience, inshallah ta'ala. We are up to page 25. So last time we were talking about the pillars of Salah. We have reached the ninth pillar of Salah. The author, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, may Allah have mercy upon him, to perform the first sujood. So the 9th pillar of Salah, after i'tidal, after standing up for ruku', from ruku' is to perform the sujood, the prostration, going down. Now in sujood there are conditions for the sujood to be valid. And some of them, or most of them, are mentioned by the author himself here. So if you want to put a line and put a number, that would be good, inshallah. So he says, number 1, by placing his revealed forehead on the ground. The revealed forehead. So according to the Shafi'i school, your forehead must be revealed. Okay, so the forehead is where your hair usually grows, all the way to your eyebrows in between. Okay, that's the required. A part of it has to touch the floor. A part of it doesn't have to be the whole forehead. So for example, just like that, there's a part of the forehead. But if someone prays like this, for example, they do sujood. Sujood is invalid according to the Shafi'i school. Okay, so the part of the forehead must be revealed on the ground with some weight or pressure. That's number 2, the second condition, with some weight or pressure. Meaning that some scholars mention that if you were to put a piece of cotton, on the place of sujood, and you do your sujood on it, the cotton should become pressed. Okay, so if someone does sujood and they're trying to lift their head with their hands, they're putting all their weight on their hands and it's just slightly touching their forehead, there's no pressure on the ground, naturally from the head, the sujood is invalid. Okay, and then the third, he says, on something that doesn't move. Okay, there is a bit of detail in this, so we'll use the board, inshallah. So a person can perform sujood on things that are connected to him or not connected to him. Or we just say connected and unconnected or not connected. So what do we mean by not connected or unconnected? For example, the sujadah. You have a sujood. If you put down something on the floor and you perform your salah on it, you do the sujood on it, the sujood is valid. Okay, so that's not connected or unconnected things. Now you have things that are connected, such as the cap, or the imamah, the turban, or the hijab, right? So these are things that are connected to a person. What is the ruling on doing sujood, for example, if you do sujood on a cap like this? Okay, now we divide this into 2 as well. So we have things that are connected that move, okay, with the person. And there are things that do not move with the person. So things that move with the person, meaning, for example, the cap. This cap, if I move it, comes around with me. Okay. Now performing sujood on something that moves around, such as the cap or the imamah itself or the hijab, this is what does not make the sujood valid. Meaning that if you do sujood on this, yeah, it's invalid. Okay. But obviously, as long as a part of the skin is touching, no problem. Right? was speaking, if there's no part of the skin touching, you're making sujood straight on this. Now, something that does not move with a person, for example, some people, they wear turbans and they have a long tail, for example, right? The tail, if they do sujood, for example, it comes down, right? And then when they go for sujood, it comes like that in front of them, right? Or something, for example, someone has long sleeves, like big sleeves, and then they do sujood, so it doesn't really move around with them, right? Does that make sense? There's a difference between these two. So this one takes the ruling of things that are not connected to a person. So it is permissible to do sujood on these things. Does that make sense? So that person has a turban, I'm pretty sure a scarf as well takes the same ruling. The end of the scarf here, if you do sujood, it comes on you, then it is still valid. Allah. So this is a bit on the detail here. The author, he mentioned on something that doesn't move. He means not this one. Okay. As long as it's not this one, it's permissible. Allah. That's the third condition for sujood. And then number 4, he says also by lifting his buttock and whatever around it above his shoulders, hands and head. So when performing sujood, the buttock area must be above the head and the shoulder and the hands. Meaning person must perform sujood like this, not like this. For example, doing sujood on a stairs, for example. Right? This is invalid. This invalidates the sujood. That's the 4th condition. Number 5, he says, and to place a part of both knees, palms, and the inner surface of the toes of each leg. So for sujood, there are 7 parts of the body that must be on the ground. What are they? Number 1 is the forehead. Number 2 is, number 3 is both hands. Right, so both hands. A part of the hands at least is on the ground. Okay, not like this, but like this. Part of the hands is on the ground. Number 4 and number 5 is both knees. Right, knees. Most likely they are covered. Number 6 and number 7 is both feet. Okay, feet or toes. Okay, so the inner part of the toes like this or like this at least. So from this, these are the 7 parts of sujood that must be on the ground. So if someone is performing sujood and one of their feet is flying in the sky, okay, it's not on the ground, the sujood is invalid. And this is something very common, unfortunately. So here we also see the forehead. So when a person performs sujood, do they have to put their nose on the ground?
Yes.
According to the Shafi'i school. No. It is recommended to put the nose as well. But the main part is the forehead. Okay.
If someone touches only forehead, not nose,
yeah,
then it's sujood valid?
Valid.
According to Shafi'i.
Okay. So yes, so the nose is sunnah. It's highly recommended because some scholars do say it's mandatory. Allah Alam. So that's the 5th condition that the author of Allah mentioned.
What about the Hanbali fiqh in this regard? They consider forehead and nose
I'm not sure.
on one part?
I'm not sure to be honest for Hanbali, but what I know is there is some scholars who say the nose as well is mandatory. That's why in the Shafi'i school it's highly recommended for the nose, because some scholars say it's wajib. So to avoid the difference of opinion, they say it's highly recommended for the nose as well. So leaving it is makruh. It's disliked to only perform sujood on your forehead without your nose. So that's the 9th pillar of salah, which is sujood, briefly. Number 10, he says, and to have tuma'nina in sujood. We mentioned what tuma'nina is. It's a pause between 2 movements. In sujood, as previously mentioned in ruku'. Number 11, to sit between the 2 sujoods by sitting up straight. So after you perform the first sujood, you come up and sit up straight. Okay? And then you can go down. And the author mentioned number 12, tuma'nina as well. So you have tuma'nina in sitting. So performing sujood and then coming up straight away, going down without sitting up straight, this is invalid. Okay? So you must have tuma'nina. How do we sit? So as long as you sit, that's the main part. How to sit? The best way to sit is iftirash, like this. Okay? This is the best way. However, you can do this. This is called ifta'a, which is also mentioned in the sunnah as well. This is permissible as well. Allahu alam. That's 13. Sorry, 12. And then 13, he says to perform the second sujood, like the first sujood, with what has been mentioned regarding it. And then number 14, to have tuma'nina in the second sujood, as mentioned previously in ruku'. So sujood is done twice in the salah. Okay, and quickly we'll go a bit out of fiqh. Is that what is the wisdom behind sujood happening twice in the rak'ah? We see Fatiha is once standing, once ruku', once, but sujood is twice in the same rak'ah. Right, so this shows the importance of sujood. That's the best position in salah. Some scholars say it's the best position because, as mentioned in the hadith, that أقرب ما يكون العبد لربه وهو ساجد. The closest position a person is to his Lord is when he's in prostration. This is why we're recommended to make a lot of dua, right? A lot of dua. We are humbling ourselves in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some scholars say standing is the best position in salah because we are reciting the words of Allah. That's the best speech. So that's why some say it's the best position. But nevertheless, we understand from this the importance of sujood, that it happens twice in a rak'ah. And number 14, so again tuma'nina, and then 15 is the final sitting, by sitting up straight. So before the salam, a person must sit. Okay, sitting again up straight, to sit up straight. Remember, the author, he says the final sitting. So the final tashahhud, meaning the first tashahhud is not a pillar. It's not a pillar. Yeah, the first tashahhud is not a pillar. Yeah, the final tashahhud only. The final sitting. So sitting is a pillar. And then 16, he says to recite the tashahhud in it. So reciting the tashahhud is another pillar. Okay? He said tashahhud in it while sitting, meaning that if someone is coming up from sujood and they start at-tahiyyatu lillahi, it's invalid. You have to sit first and then start at-tahiyyatu. Similar to al-Fatiha, as we mentioned, you have to recite while standing. From Bismillah to Wal-Ad-Dalin while standing. Okay? And the tashahhud, obviously, it will come later on in the book. It's from at-tahiyyatu lillahi all the way until وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. That's the tashahhud. Number 17, to recite the salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ after the tashahhud while sitting, by minimum saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So after the tashahhud in the final sitting, the next pillar is to say salawat upon the Prophet. To say minimum, to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That's the minimum. Obviously, the best way is to perform the salawat Ibrahimiyah, right? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad until the end, as it will come in the book, inshallah ta'ala. Before we move on, we'll want to look some differences between the first tashahhud and the second tashahhud. Okay. So we mentioned the first tashahhud is it a pillar or not? No. No.
It is a wajib.
Yes. So in the Shafi'i school, just briefly, we call it sunnah. Okay. Wajib and rukn, pillar is the same. Okay. So it is a sunnah. The first tashahhud is sunnah. The second tashahhud is, or the final tashahhud is wajib. Okay. So tashahhud, we say tashahhud, first tashahhud and the second tashahhud. So this is a sunnah and the second is a pillar, right? So we have salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and upon his family, right? Ali Muhammad, okay, the family of the Prophet. So we know the first tashahhud is a sunnah. What is the ruling of salawat upon the Prophet in the first tashahhud? It's a sunnah, okay? Sunnah as well. So in the first tashahhud, you do the tahiyyat lillah, salawat, tayyibat, tashahhud until the end. وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. Okay, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This is a sunnah. What about sending salat from the Prophet in the first tashahhud? Is it a sunnah or
Sunnah?
Huh? So this is the scholars say غير مشروع, يعني it's not recommended to send salat from the Prophet, his family, in the first tashahhud. Okay, only from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the first tashahhud. Now the second tashahhud is, or the final tashahhud is a pillar. What is the ruling of sending salat from the Prophet in the second tashahhud or the final tashahhud?
Wajib pillar.
Yeah, pillar, wajib, okay, as mentioned in the book. What about salat from the family? Huh? Pillar? Okay, sunnah. So this is a sunnah as well. So this is a difference between the first tashahhud and the final tashahhud.
But in the first tashahhud, usually the practice or widely practiced, we also only finish Muhammad Abdullah Rasul. Yeah. But Imam Nasiruddin Albani, his opinion is so he, in his opinion, Prophet sometimes, not always, sometimes read the Durud Ibrahim in the first tashahhud also.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khair. Yes. So that's the opinion of some scholars, but this is the opinion of the Shafi'i madhab. Okay. So the madhab, again, the madhab is not opinion of one or two scholars. It's opinion of thousands of scholars throughout thousands of years around the world. Okay. So this is what we're studying now, right? If someone believes it's a sunnah, no problem. They can apply it. Okay.
But in Hanafi fiqh, if someone someone recites Durud in the first tashahhud, then salat is invalid.
Okay, I don't know. Yes. Yeah, so again, it's good to learn, madhabs. I don't know like other madhabs, but I stick to what I know.
In the first tashahhud, you're not meant to say salat on the Prophet's hand.
No. So it's sufficient to say Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Nabiyyina Muhammad, for example. Yeah. Unless you believe it, if it's a sunnah, you can do it if you believe it's a sunnah. Right? But here we're discussing what is the madhab, the school. Okay, the school itself. Wallahu a'lam. So here, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Obviously, the minimum is to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So there's no sallim. Okay. However, scholars mention it's disliked, very highly disliked, to separate, to only say salli ala Muhammad or sallim ala Muhammad only. It's recommended to combine both. So you say Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad wa ala Nabiyyina Muhammad. Okay. This is according to the ayah. Right, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu. So there's both. Okay, so it's highly disliked to separate, only mention one. Okay, however, the author is mentioning the minimum, because again, we're studying what invalidates the salah. If we leave this, is our salah valid? If we leave this, for example, right? If someone is in a hurry, for example, obviously the best thing to do is to do all the sunnah, and no doubt about that. But again, we're studying the most, the minimum requirement.
So sitting, in final sitting, if we do tawarruk is not mentioned in here.
Tawarruk, no. Again, so sitting in the first tashahhud or this final tashahhud, as long as you sit, okay, it doesn't matter. So if you do sit like this in the first tashahhud, it's still valid, okay. But the best way, as we mentioned, is iftirash in the first tashahhud like this. This is the first tashahhud. The last tashahhud, the best way is like this.
Yes.
Tawarruk, okay. Like this. In some narrations mentioned like this in between. Like this. It's very weird. If you have never done it, some people probably never heard of that, but you can try this.
The salah has the one tashahhud.
Sorry?
For example,
Okay. Fajr. Yeah.
Fajr.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One tashahhud.
Okay.
Then what happens?
If wajid tashahhud, so the principle in the Shafi'i school is that every sitting, that after a easy salam, you sit tawarruk like this, like the last sitting.
Yeah, but how
Okay.
many?
So if it's different. So as long as after this you're doing salam, this is how you sit. 1 rak'ah, 2 rak'ah, 3 rak'ah. As long as it's the final sitting, you sit. This is the principle in the Shafi'i school. Allahu a'lam. And then number 18 is to recite the salam afterwards while sitting. So once a person recites the tashahhud, he does the salah upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To finish off the salah, to exit and leave the salah, he says assalamu alaikum. Okay, while sitting again. So not while standing up, while trying to leave in a hurry. Assalamu alaikum. That's invalid. The person must sit while saying assalamu alaikum. So looking right and left is a sunnah. Okay, because the author didn't mention it here. Minimum is to say assalamu alaikum. If someone says assalamu alaikum, for example, and then they break the wudu and they say wa rahmatullah, for example, the salah is valid. Or they say assalamu alaikum and they break the wudu, they haven't said the second salah. The salah is still valid. Because the pillar is the first salah. Does that make sense?
So only recite is the minimum, so you don't need to actually.
No. So if someone does tashahhud, then assalamu alaikum. The salah is valid. So this is the minimum. So if someone, before saying assalamu alaikum, they break the wudu, sorry, you have to repeat it again.
About the salawat. So what did you say? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad.
So Muhammad,
That's one.
obviously there's difference amongst the scholars. Can you add Sayyidina or not? But there's no problem in certain places. But in Adhan, for example, Shadu anna Sayyidina Muhammad Rasulullah, you can't add. there are certain du'as that they are like that. For example, adhan, right? Some also include tashahhud, some do not. But generally saying Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, there's no problem.
But original text of hadith, it came Sayyidina Muhammad?
Sorry?
In definitely it came in a hadith.
Yeah.
That hadith contains the Sayyidina?
I can't remember. But probably not yet. Some scholars say you can add that. Like Sayyidina, for example. Or, there are things that you can add in the dua. It's a dua. At the end of the day, a dua, you can make any dua. Okay? But there are certain places where, yes, you need to stick to the specific dua. Allah. So that's the salam.
What about after the rules, reading dua? Like most people read Rabbi
After the tashahhud.
during the
Sitting. Before salam.
before salah.
Okay, yes. So that's a very good question. So what is the ruling of making dua after the tashahhud and salam, salawat upon the Prophet before the salam? So this is also a highly recommended place to make dua. Okay, this is a highly recommended place to make dua. As mentioned in the hadith, I can't remember the hadith. I believe it's narrated by Ibn Mas'ud, authentic hadith, that the Prophet told Ibn Mas'ud how to say the tashahhud or the salawat upon the Prophet, and then after that he said, ask Allah whatever you wish. Okay, so this is a very good place to make dua as well, before the salah. Okay. The final and last pillar of salah is at-tartib, order. So now we know beginning of salah to the end. The final pillar is this. All of this has to be done in order. Okay, someone can't do sujood and then ruku' and flip things around. Okay. So before we move on with the book, we'll try to write down the pillars that we have studied so far, without looking at the book, inshallah. So the author mentioned 19, but we'll try to write 13. We'll try to make it smaller. Number one is
Takbir, first takbir.
intention. Number two,
Takbir is hari.
yes, takbir.
First takbir.
Number three, before Fatiha. Stand. So we mentioned you have to be standing.
Standing, okay.
Number four, yeah, Fatiha. To recite Fatiha. Number five, ruku'. And then number six, what's after ruku'? Standing up there. So we call it i'tidal.
Getting up from ruku.
Yes, getting up. Number seven,
Getting straight.
yes, that's i'tidal. After that, yes. So we just write sujood 2 times. Okay, in the salah 2 times. Number 8, yep, sit between the 2 sujood. Okay. Number 9, yeah. Okay. So final sitting. Remember, sitting is a pillar itself. Tashahhud, saying the tashahhud is another pillar. Okay. Final sitting. Number 10 is tashahhud. 11, salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 12, salam. And the last one,
Order.
So this is 13. So if you see, the author mentioned tuma'nina, right? Ruku' and then tuma'nina, i'tidal, tuma'nina, sujood, tuma'nina. We just put tuma'nina into the pillar itself. So ruku', from the pillars of ruku' is tuma'nina. For the i'tidal to be valid, you have to have, to make things shorter. So now you have 13. Okay, and this is the number that is mostly used by the Shafi'i scholars, the later Shafi'i scholars. Okay?
So one thing, because I am following some other things. So ruku, rising up from ruku is
Yeah.
but some people are not rising up fully.
Yeah.
That's why getting up upright is they add another ruku.
Yeah.
That's why they made 14.
14.
Getting
In the book?
Yes, and in some other book. I'm not
Oh, another book. Okay. Yeah. We mentioned i'tidal. We mentioned i'tidal. From the conditions for the i'tidal to be correct, you have to come up straight.
Yeah.
So just come up halfway and go sujood is not.
Yeah.
We mentioned that, yes, it's in the book, I believe. Okay, so this is briefly the 13 pillars. Now, we talked about intention, takbirat al-ihram. These are done together. As you say Allahu Akbar, you have the intention. We mentioned what we need to intend. If it's an obligatory prayer, sunnah prayer, and to stand if possible, and then recite al-Fatiha and so on. So we're going to read what the author rahimahullah mentioned. He says, order, okay, by making the intention with takbiratul ihram. Then to recite al-Fatiha while standing. Then to perform ruku' with tuma'anina. Then to perform i'tidal with tuma'anina. I think there's a typo in this. And then to perform the first sujood. So here we made it sujood 2 times. To perform the first sujood with tuma'anina and to sit afterwards with tuma'anina. And then to do the second sujood with tuma'anina. This is the order of the first rak'ah. So until where? Until here. So if you're praying multiple rak'at, in the first rak'ah you must have this. Okay, and then you go into the second rak'ah, you start again. Okay. He says that he then performs the other rak'at like the first, except that he doesn't make intention and do takbiratul ihram in the rest of the rak'at. So this is exclusive for the first rak'ah when you start the pillars. These other pillars are required in every rak'ah. Ruku' and sujood and the other pillars. Once he finishes all the rak'at, 2 or 3 or 4 of the obligatory prayer, he then sits the final sitting and recites the tashahhud, then salawat while sitting by saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, then salamu alaykum. And that's the order. So this is understood, inshallah. Any questions before we move on?
Let's assume we are offering a prayer, Isha prayer, and the Imam is reading Quran. We need to just make sure we are listening, or we need to repeat the Fatiha.
Okay, so there's difference among the scholars as well. Do you need to recite al-Fatiha or not if you're praying behind the Imam? The Shafi'i school is that in every salah, either your Imam or Ma'moom, you must recite al-Fatiha. Okay, so if you're behind the Imam, you can recite before the Imam. So for example, after Takbirat al-Ihram, he's reciting the istiftah, taking a while, you straight away start Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. No problem. Or you read after the Imam, no problem. As long as while standing you read the Fatiha. In the Shafi'i school, some scholars say no problem. No need. If Isha prayer, Maghrib prayer, Fajr prayer, no need. You listen to the Imam, that's sufficient.
If I recite Surah Fatiha before Imam, then there is no problem in Shafi'i School.
Is that preceding the Imam? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
We'll talk about this right now. Right now, we're about to jump into it. Okay, so remember this order, inshallah. Okay, we'll wrap this up. Oh no, we'll leave it here. Now to the next page, inshallah ta'ala. So we finished from the second third of the book, which is the pillars. But before we jump into the nullifiers of the prayer, which is the last third of the book, the author now is going to divide all of these pillars into three categories. Okay, you'll have it in the book at the end, page 31. There's a diagram right there, but we'll mention it here. So he says the pillars of prayer are of 3 types. Number 1, the pillars of the heart. Okay, so you have pillars that are related to the heart, pillars related to the tongue, words, and pillars related to the actions, physical body. So the first type is the action of the heart. He says that is the intention only. Okay, so this one, related to the heart. That's the intention. And its condition is to be made with takbiratul ihram and to be done while standing. So we explained this before. Intention is done while saying Allahu Akbar, to have it in your mind and in your heart that you are going to pray obligatory prayer of Dhuhr, for example, while standing, if someone is able to stand. So that's the first type, the pillars of the heart. Number 2 is the pillars of the tongue. So words that you need to say in the salah. So we have pillars of the tongue, and there are 5. Who can point them out? Without looking in the book.
The tongue.
Yes.
It's Takbiratul Ihram.
Yes, takbiratul ihram. And then
Fatiha.
Then Tashahhud.
tashahhud, al-Fatiha, someone said.
Fatiha, Durud,
And then
Salam, do Salam.
salam
Salawat.
and salawat.
Salam.
So this is T for the tongue. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 pillars of the tongue. So the author, he says, rahimahullah, he says, there are 5. Takbiratul ihram at the beginning of the prayer. So we know all of the other takbir, all of, Allahu Akbar throughout the salah is not the pillar. It's only this one. Number 2 is to recite al-Fatiha in every rak'ah. As mentioned in the Shafi'i School, the principle is every rak'ah in every salah, no matter your ma'moom, imam, praying by yourself, you have to recite al-Fatiha. Okay. Number 3 is to recite the tashahhud, as it will come in the end of the book. Number 4, in salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 5, the salam at the end of the prayer. All these last 3, meaning this one, 1, 2, 3. These 3 during the last sitting. Yeah. So these 3 must be done while sitting, as we mentioned before. So that's the end of the page.
But here is one critical thing. Some brother to the mistake. I found that the Takbiratul Ihram, for example, I found Imam on the ruku. Then I need to join ruku immediately. But before joining the ruku, I need to utter the Takbiratul Ihram. Then going ruku.
That's very
But what some people do, they're straightly going to ruku without reciting Takbiratul Ihram. Then salah will be.
So this is very important. Pillar of salah, takbiratul ihram, while standing. So when coming to the salah, some people, Allahu Akbar, what are you going down? Say Allahu Akbar, then you go down.
Yes.
But even that, when you go for ruku', you must meet with the imam in ruku' for a time of tuma'nina, as we mentioned. So for a split second, enough to say Subhanallah. Then you get the rak'ah. So if you're going down, the imam coming up, you miss the rak'ah. You missed it. Okay, this is very important to pay attention to. Jazakumullah khair. And then he says the condition of all these 5. So now he's going to mention the conditions for the pillars of the tongue. He's going to go through some of the conditions regarding the pillars of the tongue. Number 1, he says, one must hear himself if he isn't deaf, and there is nothing preventing him from so, such as wind or clamor or anything alike. If so, then he must raise his voice, that if the deafness of that or that which is preventing from hearing disappears, he could hear himself. So this, we mentioned this previously, I believe, that the minimum requirement for reciting Takbiratul Ihram, Al-Fatiha, Tashahhud, Salawat and Salam, for it to be valid, there must be some sound heard. Does that make sense? And we mentioned, if you're in a quiet place, the effort required to hear yourself, the whispers, the same effort that's required, even if it's windy or noisy, you use that same effort. Therefore, we understand praying like this, reciting Al-Fatiha is not valid. In fact, some scholars say that it's ijma', it's consensus that salah isn't valid. It's only in the heart. Also moving tongues, but there's no sound. This is also invalid. So there must be a little like whisper that you can hear yourself if you are in a quiet place. Okay. Obviously, some people take it, too much. They disturb the people around them. This is also incorrect manners, right? We have to keep it.
Even moving the tongue and making no sound, then salah will be invalid.
Yes, according to the Shafi'i School and majority of schools. Some say it is, but majority says no. Okay. Wallahu a'lam. Okay, number 2, and not to reduce any tashdeed or letter from it. So we will go through Al-Fatiha, Tashahhud, Salawat. All of this will come later on in the book. But the author is saying that you cannot remove or reduce any tashdeed, the shadda, the W. If you look into the Mus'haf, into the Quran, you'll find this tashdeed. This represents 2 letters, okay? For example, you have a ra, that means there's a ra sukun, and then another ra. So if you remove the tashdeed, you don't pronounce it, that means you have reduced a letter. The most common, for example, we have in Al-Fatiha, right? Iyaka. If someone pronounces Iyaka, they removed a letter. So the Al-Fatiha is invalid. If the Al-Fatiha is invalid and they do not repeat, also is. So this is the importance of learning Al-Fatiha.
Sorry, I am asking too many questions.
No problem.
For example, my ruku became invalid. Anyway, I missed something in the ruku. Then that rak'ah will be invalid or total salah will be invalid?
We'll come back to it. It will come in the book. Okay, so number 2 is not to reduce any tashdeed or any letter. Okay, especially Al-Fatiha. Even in the tashahhud, right, at-tahiyyat, you must make sure you pronounce every letter. The salawat as well, and etc. Okay, so all of these apply. Every letter must be recited. Number 3 is to pronounce it from its makhraj. So to pronounce the letter correctly, to the best of the ability, of course. Especially Al-Fatiha. But the most common one is, for example, wal-dallin. The dad is a heavy letter or a hard letter to learn. Some say it's only found in Arabic language. But what if someone pronounces it wal-dallin, for example? They make it al-dad. Is the salah valid? According to some scholars, it's valid. But the Shafi'i school, the salah is invalid.
If we are offering prayer behind Imam, do we need to recite any surah after Fatiha?
No. If it's like a Jahar prayer where the Imam is reciting loudly, you don't recite any other surah. You recite Al-Fatiha and then listen to the Imam. If it's like Dhuhr or Asr, for example, you have to recite another surah in the first or second. Okay. Or if you're praying, for example, in congregation, but you're outside, you can't hear the Imam reciting Fajr, then you recite by yourself, rather than just being quiet and can't listen to anything. Okay. But back to this. So this shows the importance of learning Al-Fatiha. Right? We have to teach our kids. In fact, the scholars mentioned, if, for example, a person accepts Islam just before Dhuhr, and Dhuhr comes in, Asr is 3 o'clock. Right? You have time to learn Al-Fatiha. You can learn Al-Fatiha in an hour or two. You must learn and delay the prayer. That's how important it is. If a person doesn't learn and they just pray like that, Salah is invalid and they are sinful because they're delaying something that is obligatory to learn. So this is very important. Learning Al-Fatiha, learning all of these and teaching it to our kids is very important. At least the pillars. We can teach the Sunnah, the extra, that's very good. Wallahu alam. Number 4, not to change any of its harakat that would change the meaning. So again, also harakat like the sukoon, fatha, kasra, dhamma, not to change it. Okay, especially if it can change the meaning. For example, Salat al-Ladina an'amtu, for example, someone recites like that. The Fatiha is invalid. Okay, that's if they do it not on purpose. If they do it on purpose, the whole salah could be invalid. Okay, especially changing some letters or words can change the meaning, which could lead to disbelief. If a person knows and they do it purposefully, they can fall out of Islam. Okay, such as this. And you can find out what that means, inshallah, without the shadda. Okay, if someone finds it, they can let me know. It's homework.
It's homework.
Yeah. Okay, so number 5, and he says, and not to add any letter that would change the meaning. So again, we can't take away any letters. We cannot also add any letters. Add an extra hamza or waw, for example. And number 6 is to recite its words consecutively. And this is very important. We have to point out to this. So reciting consecutively, meaning that there is nothing that cuts the recitation. Okay. Let's say, for example, so this applies again to tashahhud, salawat, but we'll focus on Al-Fatiha. For example, someone is reciting Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, and then they cough or they sneeze or they have to stop to take a breath. That's no problem. Okay, there is no problem with that. If someone, they sneeze, they say Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, and then they sneeze, and then they say Alhamdulillah, and then they continue recite or not? You can say Alhamdulillah because any dhikr is permitted in the salah. It's a dhikr. If you can't speak to someone else, that breaks the salah, as we will come to it. But any dhikr, Alhamdulillah, subhanAllah, is permissible. However, saying Alhamdulillah here is not related to the salah. It's related to what? Something outside the salah, which is sneezing. So this cuts the consecutivity of the Al-Fatiha. Does that make sense? So if you do that, Alhamdulillah, you have to repeat from beginning. Bismillah. Does that make sense? Or another example, you're reciting Al-Fatiha and you hear someone in the other room, they're screaming, they're shouting, and you're like, you purposefully stop to listen what's going on. And then you want to know, you have to repeat it. Okay. Does that make sense? If it's related to the recitation, no problem. So for example, in the Shafi'i school, as we mentioned, Maghrib, Fajr, for example, when the Imam recite loudly, you must recite Al-Fatiha. So if you're reciting Al-Fatiha, you have to Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, and the Imam is finished, he says Ameen. It's recommended to say Ameen with the Imam. So if you say Ameen with the Imam, can you continue Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, or do you have to repeat? Why? But is it related to the salah? Is it relevant to it? It is, right? Recitation of the Imam. to say Amin, for example. Or if while you're reciting Al-Fatiha, the Imam goes for sujood al-tilawah. Right? He goes for sujood al-tilawah, and you go down sujood with him, right? And you come back up. Can you continue Al-Fatiha or you have to repeat?
I have to repeat here again.
Because the sujood is relevant to the salah. It's related to the salah. But sneezing is not related to the salah.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Everyone understands, yeah? Okay. So this applies to Al-Fatiha, also Tashahhud and
So in a valid question that, maybe some imams are very fast in reciting, particularly in the silent prayer. So I'm reciting in the middle of Surah Fatiha, Imam already going to ruku. So what should I do? I need to follow the imams, definitely.
so here you can. So you started with the Imam, right? You're not late.
Yeah.
From what I remember, is that you can recite, you continue, even if the Imam, he goes down for sujood and etc. Or you can go with the Imam, right? I'm not sure if you have to add a rak'ah. I'll have to revise that. Okay. But if you are late, for example, you come and you start reciting Al-Fatiha and the Imam goes for ruku. You go for ruku, no problem. Okay? Because the Fatiha is upon the Imam. But if you start with the Imam and you didn't finish Al-Fatiha, but the Imam could finish Al-Fatiha, right? So this one I have to revise inshallah.
Because sometimes when Imam recites loud, then his pace is one. But when he recites silently, then I don't know why he's so fast. He's not maintaining his original pace. So that's why the people praying behind him, they're actually confused.
Yeah, we've got to ask the Imam this.
Yeah.
Okay, jazakumullah. So the last condition he says, and to recite it in its known order. So again, Al-Fatiha in order, can't flip it around. If you missed an ayah, you have to jump back and repeat completely. Can't jump right and left. Wallahu alam. So this is the pillars regarding the conditions for the pillars of the tongue. There are 7 conditions. Is everyone sleepy or still ready for some more?
Go.
Ready? Inshallah. Bismillah. So the third type, now he says the pillars of the body limbs or the actions, and they are 13 according to what the author mentioned. So obviously we have how many here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 pillars. We say 5 of the body or the limbs. Oh, sorry, order as well. So that's 7. Yeah. Altogether 7. This one as well. So these are the pillars of the body: standing, ruku', i'tidal, sujood twice, sitting between the 2 sujood, final sitting, and the order. So you can read here the author, he says pillars of the body limbs, there are 13: to stand up, ruku', tumanina in it, and so on until the end. And then he says in one that arises from performing these pillars in its place, and that is order, and the conditions of the pillars of the limbs. So he mentions now 2 conditions regarding these actions of the limbs. Okay. Number 1 is the previous pillar must be valid. So this is a bit of detail, this one, but we'll mention briefly and generally. When you want to jump to another pillar, the one before must be valid. Okay. If you want to go to sujood, this ruku' and i'tidal must be valid. For example, if someone, they did ruku' and then they went for sujood, they didn't do i'tidal. So now what do they have to do? Does anyone know?
Just went to work.
Okay, so they're in ruku', straight away to sujood. He forgot i'tidal.
Salah is valid.
Invalid.
Salah is invalid. So he must repeat from beginning.
Yeah, because he missed that rakah should be valid.
The rak'ah.
The rakah should be
He
valid.
did it forgetfully, not purposely.
Forgetfully, even forgetfully, the rukun is he did wrong forgetfully. Still, it is rukun.
Okay.
Only wajibat, if he forgetfully done, then he needs to compensate with sahur.
Okay. So here we will say there are 2 situations. Okay, in this scenario, in this case, if a person has reached the same pillar in the next rak'ah, of course. And if he hasn't reached it. So depending on whether a person has reached the same pillar, so in this case, which one? I'tidal, he forgot i'tidal. So we say, look, as long as you haven't reached i'tidal in the second rak'ah, you have to come back. So in sujood, you remember, I forgot i'tidal. You have to come back to straight stand away, stand up straight away. No, come back to ruku first, and then come up. Okay. And this is something very important because this happens sometimes. Some people, we'll mention it later. So this is if you haven't reached the same pillar in the next rak'ah, you come back. So if you're sitting, for example, between, you come back to ruku and then go for i'tidal, and you continue from there. This rak'ah is valid if you do that. Okay. What if now you reach the i'tidal in the second rak'ah, you come up, you're like, hang on a second, I did this first time doing it. I think I forgot i'tidal in the first rak'ah. Now what do? What you do is you continue your salah. The previous rak'ah is not counted. You add another rak'ah. Does that make sense? Okay. So
in that case, he needs to add a sahu sujood.
sorry, sujood, yeah,
Yeah.
sujood, recommended sujood.
We count this sujood.
Okay. In the Shafi'i school,
At
it's
the end of the
At the end of the salah.
two students are single.
yeah. So sujood sahwi is two sujood basically before you do the salam. So you do all of this just before the salam. You go to sujood and then you do salam. Okay. In the Shafi'i school, it's recommended. It's never mandatory. Unless the imam does it, then you have to follow the imam. That's the only situation where sujood sahwi is mandatory. Other than that, sujood sahwi itself is recommended.
The farz of Maghrib is 3 rakat,
Hmm.
and you perform 4 rakat instead of 3.
In this case, or you're talking about another?
By mistake,
Okay, mistake.
by mistake, you perform 4 rakat instead of 3.
Yeah.
Then what's
At the end, you do sujood sahwi.
sujood?
Sujood.
Or we need to repeat the whole salah.
No need. Yeah. No need. So if you accidentally add a rak'ah, for example, then you just do sujood as-sahw. Okay, sujood for forgetfulness.
accidentally missed rakat. Then
If you missed
yes.
a rak'ah. If he remembers during the salah, sorry, not during salah. I mean, if it's during the salah, he adds a rak'ah, obviously. Let's say after the salah. If it's close, the time, so he did salam, for example, he said do dhikr, 1 minute, for example, 2 minutes, oh, I forgot a rak'ah. Or someone reminded, then just add 1 rak'ah. However, if the gap is long, he went out, he had lunch and came back, then he has to repeat the whole salah. Okay, hold on. So this is the detail on that the pillar before must be valid. If not, if a person is not sure or he forgot, he must come back. Okay. And the last condition.
But one thing is very problematic. If I pray with the imam does everything right, but I did wrong. Then it's very difficult for me to come back to previous.
Again, so this scenario that I mentioned is for munfarid, someone who's praying alone.
Yeah.
For the imam, there's a different detail. For the one who's ma'moom, there's a different detail. For the ma'moom, you just follow the imam and then you add 1. Okay, no problem. Because you have to follow the imam. The last condition, he says, not to intend anything other than these pillars when performing them. So, in this case, a person is in ruku', for example, they have to come up for the purpose of i'tidal. For example, if someone is performing ruku' and then they see a cat jump out of the curtain like this, and then khalas, I'm in i'tidal. No. Because you came up because you were shocked, for example, right? You were scared, not because you came up for the i'tidal itself. Yes, or for example, let's take another example. Yeah, the one that I was going to mention. We're praying in jama'ah, right? In a congregation. Now the imam, he recites an ayah for sujood tilawah, right? He recites, for example, the end of Surah Al-Alaq, right? He recites the ayah, he finishes the surah. People think, okay, he's going for sujood, right? But he goes for ruku' instead. Some people go for sujood. And they look right and left, there's no one on the floor, right? So they come back up. What do? They straight away come to ruku'.
No,
to follow the Imam ruku. Is this correct or not?
no.
Why?
You have to stand up first.
Stand up first. Correct. Because you went down for the purpose of sujood, not for ruku.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why you have to come up first and then Allahu Akbar, go for ruku.
Okay.
This is a common.
You come up first.
Come up first. Okay. This is related to the one before we mentioned. The pillar before has to be correct. And here, you have to intend to go for it. Okay, that's why when making sujood, you have to be careful not to intend to go for something, right? As you're going down for sujood. Go down for the purpose of sujood, and then take this or move this around or something.
So what about if this imam goes to sujood for sujood tilawah, but then some of the ma'mum doesn't know, then do ruku,
Yeah.
and then imam get up, and then obviously the ma'mum also stand up. So that's fine.
They should come up and then go for sujood, I believe. Okay. But at the end of the day, sujood tilawah is
It's
sunnah.
sunnah.
Again, you see, so this is the benefit of studying pillar and sunnah. So now you know what invalidates salah and what does not really affect, and we don't have to fight about it. It's a sunnah at the end of the day.
So, if you if they went down for sujood, no, if they went down for ruku', if you went down for ruku', but they went down for sujood, do you stand up and go into sujood?
So the imam is in ruku', is that what you're saying? Or sujood?
Imam is sujood.
Everyone in sujood, but you're alone in ruku'.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you have to come up.
But what do you do when you just stand up like, and then
Come back up and then go for sujood. But even if you go for sujood straight away, again, sujood sahwi is not a pillar. Right? So it doesn't really affect much, right? But in this case, ruku' is another story. Ruku' is a pillar.
But even telling all the details that we need to return to the previous rukun, then so is there any supporting hadith for this, or it is simply the opinion of Imam Shafi'i?
No, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, there's hadith.
Because some brothers asked me the same question.
Yeah.
I couldn't answer them.
Yeah, so this is something I believe we mentioned I didn't mention in the introduction because it's a bit long. But when we say madhab or the school of Shafi'i, we're not talking about one person. This is all the opinion of Imam Shafi'i. If you study the school, there are a lot of opinions that were against the opinion of Imam Shafi'i himself. You see, because it's a school. People who come out of a school are not the same. Does that make sense? So people who come out of a certain school, like we have here, they have a similar thinking way of thinking, but they're not all the same. Does that make sense? So it's a school. It's not we're all blindly following Imam Shafi'i. No. Right? And when it comes to madhab, it's not just what is a pillar, what is not. It's also usul, the foundations. How do they derive from hadith? Okay. How, if there's conflicting and etc. So it's a school, right? Thousands of scholars from the time of Imam Shafi'i until today, from all around the world, studied the school, checked the school. They read the books and etc. So a school, like a madhab, is different from an opinion of one or two scholars. Okay. So this is very important to know the superiority of a madhab, of a school. And this is the sunnah of the scholars, the way of the scholars. Every scholar, Shaykh Islam and Taymiyyah, if we look into every scholar, really, they started where the madhab. Nobody went up the ladder onto the roof without a ladder, right? Everyone took a ladder up, habba, bit by bit, until they reached where they reached. Does this make sense? So inshallah, we'll stop here for today. We went for an hour. Jazakumullah khair for your time and for your attention. Barakallahu feekum. Any questions before we finish off? All good, inshallah. Inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow we'll start on the nullifiers of prayer. So things that breaks a person's prayer, inshallah ta'ala. This is also very important. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us and to grant us beneficial knowledge, to make this an argument for us, not against us on the day we meet him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant swift aid and victory to our brothers and sisters, especially those in Palestine. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair.